Right, sit down. So, we're back on Joan Aitken's The Wolves of Willoughby Chase. I've got two victims sitting next to me. Look at this. Very smart. Smart. Put it on like a granny again.
Aye.
I'm joking, you wouldn't really want to be seen dead looking like a granny, would you?
What?
Right. And I'm trying a different pair of goggles. Bought these so I could watch TV with. Would you pass me that cloth to wipe them with? Cheers. So what's the word that we didn't understand in this book yesterday, Luke?
Frame relations.
What does it mean?
Battlements.
What's that mean?
The bricks that are like there's big stones that are popped on castles, with a gap in between each one, so you can look down or throw things down.
Right, we're on to chapter 3. When Sylvia woke, it was broad daylight and the train was running through a mountainous region, wooded here and there, and with but few and scattered dwellings. Her companion was already awake and munching away at an enormous piece of cold sausage. Sylvia felt herself to be nearly dead of hunger. She remembered Aunt Jane's precept, never eat in front of strangers, but surely Aunt Jane had not intended her to go for a whole night and day without taking some refreshment. And moreover, the good soul could not have anticipated the dreadful peril that her niece was to encounter. Perils which had left Sylvia so weak and faint that she felt she might never reach Willoughby Chase alive unless she could open a little packet and consume some of its contents. Perhaps, she thought, the shared adventure of the wolves formed some sort of an introduction to her fellow traveller. She pondered over this matter for some time and, at length, driven by her ravenous appetite, and with many timorous glances at the strange man, she opened a carpet bag and took from her parcel of food one or two of the little dry rolls her aunt had provided, rolls that contained in each a tiny slither of ham, frail and thin as pink tissue paper. The remainder she put back for later in the day. After this frugal meal she felt greatly restored and was not too discomposed when she saw that the man, having devoured his sausage down to the twisted end, was now smiling at her in a manner that was evidently intended to be the height of amiability. "There, now we both feel better," he remarked. "It was most kind of you, sir, to lend me your rug," Sylvia faltered. "Couldn't let you freeze to death, my dear. Could I? Not after you'd shown such pluck and spirit over the wolves. Some little gals would have screamed and cried, I can tell you." "Will they come back again?" inquired Sylvia, glancing anxiously out. The train was now running across a wide snowy plain, dazzling bright under the sun of a clear blue morning. "Not till this evening," he told her. "When we get to the wolds at dusk, you can depend on it, there'll be wolves there to meet us. No need to worry, though." Sylvia looked her doubt of this statement, and he exclaimed, "Pshaw, wolves are cowardly brutes. They won't hurt you unless they outnumber you by more than 10 to 1. If you feel anxious about it, I'll get my gun, though I don't generally use it for small fry." And to Sylvia's alarm, he pulled down a canvas-wrapped bundle that she had taken for fishing rods and took from it a long, heavy, glinting blue gun. Opening a smaller bag, he brought out a few cartridges and clapped them into the breech. Then, turning to Sylvia, she winced away in alarm. He said, "Now, my dear, shall I give you a proof of my marksmanship? Shall I, eh?" "Oh no, sir, please don't. Please do not. Indeed, I am sure you can shoot extremely well." "Can't be sure till you have seen me, and it will pass the time for us both." So saying, he opened the window at one end of the compartment, while Sylvia, with her hands to her ears, pressed herself as far as possible into a corner at the other end. "Now then, what's there to shoot? Can't very well shoot cattle, though it would be a rare joke, ha ha. There's a bunny. Bang! Got him. Did you see him go head over heels? Sylvia had seen no such thing, for her hands were over her eyes, and her nose buried in the red and black patterned upholstery. Now a rook. He's flapping along slowly. It's like a crow. I'll wait till we catch him up. There, tumbled down like a stone. The farmer will wonder where he came from. He fired one or two more shots and then remarked, but I mustn't waste all my cartridges. Must keep some for the wolves. What? And put the gun back in its case, carefully cleaning it before he did so. The compartment was reeking with acrid blue smoke, and Sylvia was nearly choking. There. I never asked if you'd like to try a shot, the man said, but I fancy the gun would be a bit heavy for you, as you're on the small side. A lighter fowling piece would be the thing for you. Indeed, I hope I shall never need to shoot at all, said Sylvia, horrified at the very possibility of such an idea. Never know when it might come in useful. My old mother used to say that every little girl should be able to cook, play the piano, sing and shoot. Sylvia thought of Aunt Jane's very different catalogue of accomplishments for little girls, in which crewel work, purse netting, and making paper dollies took high place, and could not agree with him. The thoughts of Aunt Jane made her sad once more, and she sighed deeply. Are you going far? The man asked. Let's get acquainted. My name's Grimshaw, Josiah Grimshaw. Sylvia did not much wish to confide in him, but she felt that if she did not talk to him, he might get bored and recommend shooting out of the window. Anything was preferable to that. Accordingly, she told him her name, and that she was travelling to the house of her uncle, Sir Willoughby Green. He expressed great interest in this. Ah, yes, indeed. I've heard of Sir Willoughby. Richest man in 5 counties, isn't he? Sylvia knew nothing of that. And you'll have a fine time there, eh? Shall you be staying there long? Oh, yes. You see, my dear Mamma and Papa are dead, and so I am to live there now with my cousin Bonnie. And your uncle and aunt will look after you? He said, nodding. Oh, not for very long, she told him. My poor Aunt Sophia is very delicate, and it is necessary for my uncle to take her on a voyage south for her health. So they will be leaving very soon after I get there. My poor cousin Bonnie, how she will miss them. But we shall have a governess who is related to us, and of course there are many servants there to look after us, and I hope that Aunt Sophie will soon be better and come back to England. Aunt Jane says she is so pretty and kind. He nodded again. Afternoon was now come upon them, grey with promise of more snow. The train had left the levels and was running into more upland country, wastes, wide and lonely, with not a living thing stirring across its bare and open expanses. It was bleak and forbidding, and Sylvia shivered a little, thinking what a long way there was yet to go before she reached her unknown destination. The day dragged on. To her relief, Mr. Grimshaw presently fell asleep again and sat snoring in his corner. Sylvia took out Annabella once more and showed her the landscape. It seemed to her that the poor doll looked somewhat startled and dismayed at the dreary prospect, which was not surprising, since her painted eyes had never before surveyed anything wilder than Hyde Park on a sunny morning. Never mind, Annabel, Sylvia said, comforting her. We'll be there soon, and there'll be warm fires and many beautiful things to look at. I expect Bonnie will have many doll friends for you to play with. Oh dear, I hope they won't laugh at you in your funny little old pelisse. She felt rather self-reproachful about Annabel's old clothes, but there really had not been a scrap of white curtain left by the time her own outfit had been completed. She consoled herself and the doll as best she could, and presently sang some quiet songs in an undertone when it seemed it seemed fairly sure, judging by the loudness of Mr. Grimshaw's snores, that she would not wake him with her singing. At length darkness came, and poor Sylvia was dismayed by the sight, while it was yet dusk, of many animal shapes streaming in a broken formation across the snow. She heard again that lonely, heart-shaking cry of the wolves and wondered whether to waken Mr. Grimshaw and tell him. But the train chugged on its way without slowing, and the wolves came and went in the shadows of the trees, never approaching very near, so that she felt it would be cowardly to disturb him, and as long as there was no immediate danger, she greatly preferred to let him sleep on. It was now quite dark, and Sylvia wished very much that she had some means of knowing the time. Mr. Grimshaw had a great gold watch in his waistcoat, but this was covered up, and she could not tell whether she was likely soon to reach her journey's end. She had been in readiness since twilight, with the last little hard roll eaten and the carpet bag buckled up, and Annabel safely tucked away under her cloak once more. All at once there was a grinding jerk, and the train came with violent abruptness to a halt, the wheels screeching in protest, and the windows almost starting from their frames. "Oh, what has happened? What can it be?" cried Sylvia. Mr. Grimshaw leapt to his feet and reached upwards to pull down his portmanteau from the rack, but either from clumsiness or on account of the jolt which the next coach struck theirs as it slid to a halt, he gave the case too vigorous a tug. It toppled forward and fell with a most appalling crash directly upon his head, felling him to the floor. He lay apparently stunned. Sylvia was terrified. She sat utterly fixed for 2 or 3 seconds, and then rushed to the window, which had fallen open when the train stopped, and thrust out her head to see if there was anyone to whom she might appeal for help. Greatly to her relief and joy, she discovered that they had actually stopped at a little forest station. Her portion of the train was at the extreme end of the platform, and the wildly swinging and flickering lamps did not enable her to read the name upon the notice board, but she saw that a little group of persons carrying lamps and bundles were rapidly approaching down the length of the station, appearing to glance into each compartment in turn as they proceeded. She could not distinguish individuals of the group, but gathered an impression of urgency from their manner, an impression which was intensified by some indistinguishable shouts from the engine driver, borne back on the wind. "Help!" called Sylvia, leaning from her window. "Help, please!" She was afraid that her faint cry would not be heard, but at least one member of the group responded to it, for there was an answering halloo, and a small figure detached itself from the rest and darted forward. "Sylvia, is that you?" Sylvia had hardly time to register more than a pair of bright, dark eyes, rosy cheeks, black locks escaping from under a little fur cap, before, with a cry of "Mind now, Miss Bonny, don't get so far ahead," a man had come up and was busy undoing the fastening of the compartment door. "Miss Sylvia? Is it, miss? We'll soon have you out of there," he called cheerily, wrestling with the frozen and snow-covered handle, while Bonny somewhat impeded his activities, dancing up and down, blowing kisses to Sylvia, and crying, "Poor dear Sylvia, you must be frozen. Never mind, you'll soon be warm and snug. We have a foot warmer and ever so many blankets in the carriage. Oh, how I'm going to love you. What fun we shall have." Sylvia responded heartily to these overtures, and then exclaimed urgently to the man, who had now undone the door, "There is a gentleman here in need of assistance. I greatly fear that he has been stunned by his suitcase. Pray, can you help him?" "Let's have a look at him then, miss," said the man. "You pop out with Miss Bonny and let James take you back to the carriage. That will be the safest for you." But Bonny exclaimed, all interest, "A man hurt? Oh, poor fellow. We must help him. Solly, we had better take him home." The other members of the group had come up by now, and there was clamour and discussion. "What's to be done? Can't leave the poor gentleman in the train like that. It is another 2 hours to Blastburn, and like as not he'd freeze to death. Well, whatever you do, said a whiskered man in a flat cap who appeared to be the station master. Do it quick, or the wolves will settle the matter. Hark, I hear them now. We've not a moment to spare.
Hark.
Just like it's a call to get your attention. I hear them now. We've not a moment to spare. And an anxious toot from the engine driver's whistle seemed to indicate that he was likewise of this opinion. Take him out then, cried Bonny. Put him in the carriage. I'm sure my father would wish it. And James and Solly agreeing, Mr. Grimshaw and his luggage were lifted forth, together with Sylvia's carpet bag. The door was slammed, and the guard waved his green lamp. Smoke and sparks puffed back on the wind as the engine heaved itself under way and the train slowly ground forward. The guard nimbly swung himself on board as the rear of the train passed them, and Sylvia, glancing back as she was hurried along the platform by Bonny's eager hand, saw its serpent line of lights disappearing, winding through the trees. Now the grinding and hissing of the engine was gone. Sylvia could hear the howls of the wolves, distinct and frightening, and she understood the haste of the party to be gone. She received a confused impression of the small station building, with its fringed canopy and scarlet-painted seats, as she was hustled through, and then they came to the neat little carriage in front of which 6 black horses were steaming, stamping and shivering under their rugs, as impatient as the humans to be off. Let him on the seat, cried Bonny. That's it. James, now wrap a rug over him. So, is his luggage all there? Capital. Now, Sylvia, spring in.
What's capital?
Just means great. But poor Sylvia was too exhausted and cold to manage it, and James, the footman, lifted her carefully up and deposited her on the opposite seat, wrapping her in a beautiful soft blue merino rug and placing her feet upon a foot warmer. Bonny snuggled in beside her and cried, Now we can go. And indeed it was only just in time, as James and Solly swung themselves up and the station staff dashed inside their little edifice. There was a chorus of yelps and howls, and the first of a considerable pack of wolves came lopping into the station yard. There was a flash and a deafening report as James fired his musket among them. Solly whipped up the horses, who needed no whipping, and the carriage seemed almost to spring off the ground, so rapid was the motion which it left the building and lights behind. There had been a new fall of snow, and their progress was silent as they flew over the carpeted ground, save for the muffled hoof beats and the cry of the wolves behind them. Those poor men in the station, exclaimed Sylvia. Will they be safe? Oh, yes, Bonny told her reassuringly. They have plenty of ammunition. We always bring them some when we come, and food too, and the wolves can't get in. And the wolves can't get in. It's only troublesome when a train has to stop and people get out. But tell me about that poor man. What's the matter with him? Was he taken ill? No, it was his portmanteau that fell on him and knocked him unconscious, Sylvia explained. The train stopped with such a jerk. Yes, the drivers always do that. You see, if the wolves notice a train slowing down, they are on alert at once, and all start to run towards the station, so as to be there when the passengers get out. Consequently, if a train has to stop here, the driver goes as fast as he can till the very last moment, in order to deceive them into thinking that he is going straight through. But now tell me about yourself, said Bonny, affectionately passing an arm round Sylvia and making sure that she was well wrapped up. Did you have a pleasant journey? Are you hungry or thirsty? Oh no, thank you. I had some provisions with me for the train. We had quite a pleasant journey. A wolf jumped into our apartment last night, but Mr. Grimshaw, that gentleman, stabbed it to death, and we moved into another compartment. Is he a friend of yours? Bonny said, nodding over this incident. Oh dear, no. I had never seen him before. Indeed, I did not like him very much, Sylvia confessed. He seemed so strange, although I believe he meant to be kind. The two children were silent for a moment or two as the carriage galloped on its way. The soft rugs were delicious to Sylvia, and the grateful warmth of the foot warmer as it struck upwards, gradually thawing her numbed and chilled feet. But the sweetest thing of all was the friendly pressure of Bonnie's hand and the loving brightness of her smile as she turned every now and then to scan her cousin. "I can't believe you are really here at last," she said. "I wonder which of us is the taller. What delightful times we shall have. Oh, I can't wait to show you everything. The ponies. My father has brought a new little quiet one for you, in case you are not used to riding. And the hothouse flowers, and my collection, and the wolfhounds. We shall have such games." Collection, sorry. "And the wolfhounds. We shall have such games. And in the summer we can go for excursions on the wolds with the pony trap. If only Mama and Papa didn't have to go away, it would be quite perfect," she sighed. "Poor Bonnie," said Sylvia impulsively, squeezing her cousin's hand. "Perhaps it will not have to be for very long." She received a grateful pressure in return, and they were silent again, listening to the crunch of the wheels on the snow and the cry of the wolf pack now becoming fainter behind them in the distance. There was something magical about this ride, which Sylvia was to remember for the rest of her life. The dark, snow-scented air blowing constantly past them, the boundless wold and forest stretching away in all directions before them, the tramp and jingle of the horses, the snugness and security of the carriage, and above all, Bonnie's happy welcoming presence beside her. After a time, Bonnie said, "I wonder how that poor man is. What did you say his name was?" "Mr. Grimshaw." Bonnie leaned across and plucked gently at his hand. "Mr. Grimshaw, Mr. Grimshaw, are you any better?" But there was no reply. "He must be unconscious still," she said. "I wish we had some restoratives to give him. However, we shall be at home in another hour. Patton and Mrs. Shubunkin, Mrs. Shubunkin, will know what to do for him. Patton is my maid, and oh, such a dear, and Mrs. Shubunkin is the housekeeper." Presently Sylvia began to nod, and found her eyelids closing despite all her efforts to keep awake. But she had hardly more than dozed off when the carriage stopped, with a clattering and a barking of dogs, and many shouts of greeting. Looking eagerly out of the window, she saw the great, rosy, glittering facade of Willoughby Chase, with every window shining a golden welcome. They had arrived. Bonnie did not wait for James to open the carriage door. She had it unlatched in a moment and leaped out into the snow, turning to help her cousin with affectionate care. Sylvia was stiff and dazed with fatigue, and as Bonnie led her tenderly up the great curving flight of steps and into the hall, she received only a vague impression of many lights and much warmth, people rushing hither and thither, and the kindly voice, that of Patton the maid, saying, "Poor little dear, she is wearied to death. James, do you carry her upstairs while I ask Mrs. Shubunkin for a posset." The posset came. No idea. The posset came, steaming, sweet and delicious. I think it's like a small chicken, I don't know. And Patton's gentle hands removed Sylvia's travelling clothes. Sylvia was too sleepy to study her surroundings before she was placed between soft, smooth sheets and sank deep into a dreamless slumber. Later in the night she awoke and saw stars shining beyond the white curtain at her bed's foot. Suddenly she recalled Aunt Jane's voice teaching her astronomy. "There is Orion, Sylvia dear, and the constellation resembling a W is Cassiopeia." Oh, poor Aunt Jane. Would she be lying awake too, watching the stars? Would she be warm enough under the jet-trimmed mantle? What would she do at breakfast time with no niece to warm the teapot, brew the bohea, and make the toast gruel? Tears began to run down Sylvia's cheeks, and she drew a long breath, trying to suppress her silent sobs. The next moment she heard feet patter across the carpet and two small, comforting arms came round her neck. A cheek was rubbed lovingly against her wet one. "What is it, Sylvia dear? Are you homesick? Shall I come into bed with you?" Sylvia was on the point of revealing her worries about Aunt Jane. Then she realised that she must not. Aunt Jane's pride would not let her accept help from her brother, and so Sylvia must not disclose that she was lonely and cold and poor. But oh, somehow she must find a means of helping her aunt. She must. "Don't cry," Bonnie whispered. "This is your home now, and we shall do such delightful things together. I am sure I can make you happy." She hugged Sylvia again and, slipping into the bed, began telling her of all the plans she had for sledging and skating and picking primroses in spring and days on the moors in summer. Sylvia could not help being cheered by this happy prospect, and soon both children fell asleep, the dark head and the fair on one pillow. Right, I'll stop there.